Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the continent of Europe. Here's a map of Europe. Remember, we've talked about Europe. We've talked about Europe when we talked about kings and queens. We talked about the United Kingdom or England and the British, how they came across to the New World. We've talked about Italy and when they were going over, remember the boy and the girl that were trying to find a way to get to Asia. We talked a little bit about Portugal, where Christopher Columbus came from. So this is Europe. There are 44 countries in Europe, all with their own governments, laws, and languages. Our first stop in Europe is the United Kingdom. Every year there, on November 11th, people remember the soldiers who fought in World War I and World War II. This day is called Remembrance Day. People wear or display red poppies as a sign of remembrance. And a poppy is a red flower. Do you see it in the picture? Down here at the bottom, there's a bunch of red poppies. So do you remember how many countries they said there are in Europe? 44, that's a lot, isn't it? Each of these countries has its own governments, laws, and languages. And they all, the people living on the continent of Europe are called Europeans. Well, and I think I forgot to tell you that people that live in Mexico are usually called Mexicans, and people who lived in Canada are called Canadians. I think I forgot to tell you that. But people that live in Europe are called Europeans. So people who speak languages other than English, I think I'm supposed to ask you, do you know anybody who speaks another language besides English? And I think you know Madame Bose speaks French, right? So in Europe, there are so many different countries and so many different languages that are spoken. France, where Madame Bose is from, is in Europe. And remember, they celebrate a holiday on November 11th called what? Yes, Remembrance Day. And they remember the soldiers that fought and died in the wars. We also have a holiday in the United States that we celebrate soldiers as well. It's called Veterans Day. It's in the fall. Each year in Venice, Italy, in early spring, people take part in a carnival that lasts for several days. They dress up and they wear the most incredible costumes and masks. This celebration is hundreds of years old. Look at those fancy costumes. Do you remember what country this takes place in? Italy. Remember, a carnival is a big festival where there's lots of music and dancing and probably food and people are dressed up. And then what do they celebrate in Venice, Italy in the spring? They celebrate that carnival where they dress up. In the European country of Germany, there really are castles just like in fairy tales. This is Hohenzollern. Hohenzollern. I hope I'm saying it right. This is Hohenzollern Castle. Castles were built for kings and queens to live in. Some kings and queens still do live in castles. The Eiffel Tower, at the bottom, is in Paris, France. It is a tall metal structure that sits in the center of the city. It is higher than a 100-story building or a 100-floored building. So remember when we talked about kings? Kings were rulers of a country, and queens could also be a ruler. The king was the boy and the queen was the girl. So there are many stories and fairy tales and movies and things about kings and queens and castles, right? So does that mean they're real or make-believe? I guess they could be both, right? Kings and queens were real, but there's also some make-believe stories about them. So they talked about the Eiffel Tower being a structure. Structure means something that's built by putting pieces together. Can you see how the Eiffel Tower was built? you looked at it really close, you probably can't see it close enough. There was lots of metal pieces that are put together. Do you think it took them a long time to build the Eiffel Tower? It did. It took them a little over 2 years to build it. Now, if you look at the tiny picture right there, this is a tall building. It's a 100-story building. So they wanted you to see how it compares to the Eiffel Tower, which is kind of hard to tell because they aren't right next to each other. But that looks awfully tall, doesn't it? That's how tall the Eiffel Tower is. So 2 of the countries that we've talked about now are Germany and France. What do you call the old stone buildings where kings and queens in Europe lived? Yep, they were called castles. And what's the name of that famous structure in the middle of Paris, France? Yes, the Eiffel Tower. Oh, isn't that cute? This little spiky creature called the European hedgehog lives in people's yards, in the countryside and in the woodlands. Hedgehogs are found all across Europe. When hedgehogs are scared, they roll up into a tight little ball. The European pine marten has a coat of dark brown fur with a patch of white around its throat. Pine martens can climb trees. They hunt at night in dark woodland areas. So what are 2 animals you might see in Europe? A hedgehog and a pine marten. If you traveled through Europe, what do you think you'd like to go see? I would love to see the Eiffel Tower and a castle. That would be pretty cool. And they have some yummy food there. I'd love to go eat their food as well. All right, that's it for Europe. You can go and do your pages in your passport. Tomorrow we'll travel to another country. See you soon. Bye-bye.